We've got 2 down and 1 to go, so welcome back guys to my final Locke Key review video, and today we're going to be talking the final 3 episodes, speaking of that ending, explaining it, going into it from a comic book perspective, and talking about that departure from the comics as the season comes to a close. So without further ado, and because we've still got a lot ahead of us, let's start by talking episode 8. So we finally get the Zach staying at Ellie's bed, that part that's been missing since the beginning of the season, only this time he's not really masquerading as Zach. He's just Lucas in Lucas' body, being Lucas and not trying to masquerade as someone else. You know, the best friend and boyfriend of Tyler and Kinsey, respectively. Now with that though comes the explanation of why Joe Ridgway ended up dead, because Joe Ridgway did notice Lucas, did see Lucas, and that is why he called Nina and tried to inform her of something that he did find out about. Now Nina with her hair down is more towards the Nina from the comics, drunk all the time, hair down, but still not as vibrant, not as sexy as the Nina in the comics. Also, Detective Matuko is finally showing that little bit of a crush on Nina, just like the original version did, throwing that broken mug into the mending cabinet that replaced the chair that I spoke about on my previous video, being plugged in there to end up being fixed, but no complaints here. Seeing it fixed and trying to put one thing after the other that's not really part of the comics, but the real part out of the comics is Rendell's ashes being plugged in there, and those ashes not successfully turning into Rendell. Circling back though to Lucas and Ellie under Lucas' spell makes perfect sense. The play date with Rufus, that's right out of the comics. The truth is though, Ellie over here is not as much under Lucas' spell as she was on the pages of the comics. Now at this point in my binge of the series, I did start having lesser suspicions of Gabe, even though the guy's generally speaking quite suspicious, but the appearance of Lucas kinda threw me off a little bit. Gabe seemingly taking Kinsey away from Scott, that's an Easter egg to Kinsey ending up falling for Jamal instead of Scott, who was the first to have a crush on her on the pages of the comics, and of course we see the latter, Scott that is, blaming Jamal for it. But speaking of some of the deviations over here, one major deviation is that Kinsey on the pages of the comics wasn't really in favor of her mother drinking. Over here she's a little bit in favor. Over here she just thinks that her mother drinking might bring her into the fold of everything that's been going down. Nina seeing stuff in general while all drunk, noticing all the magic that's not really part of the original story. She never really noticed the magic, never really saw it, whether it was because she was or was not drunk. Now we finally get a mention of the Omega Key, which is really what Dodge's endgame is all about. We finally see the list of names carved on that rock down in the cave, the keepers of the keys, just the way it was in the comics, except that Lucas did have Dodge carved in there as his middle name, which would have been a dead giveaway to Tyler and Kinsey over here. Anyway though, Kinsey does come to realize this fact firsthand from Erin when she pays her a visit, and that wasn't really too long after. Now Dodge on the other hand never really needed to get the Omega Key from Erin or find out about the whereabouts of the Omega Key from Erin. His relationship with Erin in present day was all about the fact that he wanted to kill her. He wanted to make sure that she doesn't let anyone know who he really was. But here's one thing that did happen in the comics, I just mentioned that, which is Nina deciding to throw Rendell's ashes into the mending cabinet, hoping it would work, hearing Tyler walk in, thinking he was Rendell, even though in the comics she does get all dressed up, all dolled up, and throws herself at her son, thinking he was her husband, back from the dead. Now the Omega Key hidden amidst Rendell's ashes, that's the last thing on this episode, and that's quite spot on when it comes to the comics. Moving on though to episode 9, Dodge has been using the identity key all along, switching back and forth between Lucas and Dodge, just like she did on the pages of the comics, only as I mentioned before, it was the gender key. There was no identity key. The identity key is more of a combination of multiple keys. This is also the first time we get to see the Crown of Shadows, the one the finale of the season would be titled after, and of course the Shadow Key, even though on the pages of the comics we do see it way earlier. It comes into play from the very beginning. The murder of Joe Ridgway, same reason, same hands, different method, but also with the addition of the presence of Ellie for all of it. Ellie contemplating killing Lucas. She did try that on the pages of the comics as well, and Lucas threatening her and Rufus abusing her, claiming that she should be happy that they are together again. All of that is right out of the source material as well. Now, Kinsey's fear attacking Eden, that's an Easter egg for the breaking of the bottle where she imprisoned it, her fear sneaking into Tyler's head and making a mess out of it. Jackie's reaction to the whole situation with the keys, that's pretty similar to Jordan's reaction on the pages of the comics as well. We hear about part of the memory we visualize in the comic book version and then watch the rest, done differently but still with the same outcome. Lucas murdering his friends one after the other. Ellie's breaking point, the well house, she did that as well on the pages of the comics. Only her mother had pushed her so hard she would head to the well, followed by her mother, where Dodge would kill her. Last but not least though, before this episode is over, we finally get to see Lucas using the Shadow Key and the associated Crown of Shadows, and in the process he makes the very common yet always entertaining to hear statement titled to the Simon and Garfunkel song, "Hello Darkness, my old friend." But all of that though does bring us to the finale of the season, episode 10. Nathaniel, Matuku and Nina getting together seems a little bit less than the crush that we do see on the pages of the comics, an AA friendship, but then, close to the end of the episode, it starts feeling like it's heading there, towards that crush, something that they're probably gonna end up addressing on the second season of the series. Now, dodging the attack of the shadows in the female form of the lady in the well finally happens, very much delayed from the very first time in the comic book version. However, though it does happen close to the end of the comic book as well, only it's not Lady Dodge, but it's rather Dodge in Bode's body after separating his ghost from his body using the Ghost Key. Now, all the running from the shadows, the shadows getting scared by the light, that's all part of the comic book as well. The idea of sending Dodge back through the Black Door, that was never really on the table in the comics. The Black Door was only open because Dodge wanted to raise an army of her own with the help of the demons on the other side. One way or the other, though, the show had to have it opened. There were 4 key players during the events in the cave at the very end: Scott, Jamal, Jackie, and Jordan. Instead, we've got Scott, Gabe, Jackie, and Eden. But on this episode as well, we get a little bit of a pop culture reference, walking towards the gates of Mordor. That was quite the solid Lord of the Rings reference for that kind of moment as they headed towards the Black Door. But okay though, by now in the comic book version, Ellie should be dead, Rufus should be making his way back after escaping from a psychiatric facility to help the Locke family and Bode, whose body, by the way, and as I mentioned before, has been separated from his spirit and is now possessed by none other than Dodge. Over here though, some of that is changed, some of that is delayed, including the death of Ellie and the way she dies as well, because over here she's just thrown through the Black Door at the hands of the kid, who by the way include Gabe. Gonna talk about Gabe in a moment as well. But let us talk another departure first. So during those final moments, a bunch of this group did get possessed. That includes Scott, that includes Jordan, and that includes Jackie. And all 3 of them on the pages of the comics would end up dead when Tyler would create the Alpha Key to separate the demon from the possessed. However though, the Alpha Key is just one more thing that ended up missing on this season, and the Alpha Key is something we're probably going to be seeing on season 2. Eden though did get possessed, which is less towards the effect of one of those 3 that got possessed on the final pages of the comic, and more towards the effect that we've got 2 villains for season 2. But of course though, there's a lot missing by the end of the season. They want to make a season 2, so they kind of left it a little bit open-ended. A lot of real deaths are missing, one presumed death as well is missing, that's Bode, and that's before Tyler ends up realizing Bode's spirit is just about trapped behind the ghost door. Now, Rufus in the comic books would not end up with his uncle, but instead is put at the risk of ending up in the system, but Nina adopt him. That's what the adoption thing with Ellie at the beginning of the season kind of came from. That's an Easter egg to Nina adopting him by the end of the comic book. Now, there's also the fact that in the comics, Ellie's death was a known fact rather than just a missing person's case. Bode asking Rufus to mail him a picture of the front door of his uncle's house, that was similar to what Dodge did, seducing one of the guards of the psychiatric facility into mailing him a picture of the door to Erin's room so he could basically kill her. The entire situation with Gabe, who did sound too fishy from the get-go, does make him into the Zach version of the series, except that storyline would have ended up by now and the entire deal sealed and over with. It is pretty obvious though that this was Dodge's plan B on the series. It is pretty obvious as well that they're doing the Zach-Kinsey relationship on the upcoming season with Gabe instead, and with that it's pretty obvious that a lot that was not done from the comic on this season is gonna be done on the next season. While it seems though that the kids killed Ellie, Gabe or Dodge were the ones who set them up to do so, Gabe's also got one more of his kind running around in Eden's body, which as I mentioned before is an addition, but at the same time it's kind of similar to the conversion of Jordan, Scott and Jackie in the comics. One final departure though would be all about Erin Voss. We never got to know what happened to her, how she went all nuts. She does resemble a lot the Erin Voss from the comics. All she could say there was Dodge. However though, and as opposed to the comic books, her memories were never brought back, never dropped back into her head. The series seemed to ignore Rendell's relationship with Kim and jumped right into, that little relationship that he ended up having with Erin. So yeah, we're gonna find out more about that on season 2. A few seconds though before I wrap up this video, let me give you my verdict on the first season of Locke & Key. Locke & Key, in my opinion, is one hell of an interesting comic. I mean, it had its ups and it had its downs, but in the end, it was quite the interesting comic. The same does apply for the series, but I still prefer the comic. Yes, the visualizations compared to the comic was awesome, and yes, the series did a really good job out of it. But there are elements that are still missing, elements that we're probably gonna see on season 2, and I think when we see those kind of elements, I'm gonna be able to say yes, the two are actually equals. That being said though, my work here is done, so let me know in the comments down below what you thought of the first season of Locke & Key. Let me know as well if you're excited for the possibility of a second season of the series. And finally, let me know if you've read the comic before. If you haven't, I do recommend reading them. Let me know as well if you liked this video by dropping it one of those much appreciated likes, subscribing to this channel, and make sure while you're at it to enable notifications in order to get updates when I upload a new video, publish a new community post, or start a new live stream. But until the next time that you tune in for another one of my videos, Locke & Key or otherwise, thank you so much for tuning into this video, and have a great day.